like we never have balance in our life. We are balancing always, right? If your kid needs more from you tomorrow, then you got to put more energy there, right? You're never gonna have perfect balance between each of these things.
Balance is a myth. Yep.
Sometimes they require a lot more, and so like you just have to acknowledge, and this is probably the reason for like, man, make sure you have a good category for margin and that sort of thing. Like, man, I remember 3 years ago, my brother died. It was like, I really had a hard time after that because the energy that I put into each of these, it had to kind of change, and it was like, I was dealing with physical ailments I'd never dealt with before. I had to put more energy into my parents like I never had before. Yeah. It was affecting my wife. Like it was just like, man. And I think that's reason to say why each of these are parts of the flywheel. Like, we're not always in control of it, but like, man, if one of these is having a big issue, whether it's your fault or not,
right,
it is going to be the thing that will dominate your life.
This is Breaking Barriers, where we help pastors and churches grow so that they can go.
Hey guys, welcome back to Breaking Barriers podcast. Man, we're excited today to be continuing a conversation that this is Pastor Andrew Hopper, had with Pastor Bobby Harrington around organizing your life in a way that actually helps support by your own health, the health of a growing church. One of the things that we've said in last week's episode was that there is no way your church's health and growth is going to outpace your own health and growth. We see that sometimes in the church world, but it inevitably leads to sort of a break somewhere, kind of like a guy on steroids that's getting really good weights in the weight room, but man, he's not doing it in a healthy way, and it ends up outpacing what his body can do, and if something breaks, well, we're talking about this. Hey, fitness, family, flock, finance, man, those things are areas in your life where you need to have a huge vision for growth, and if you have that huge vision for growth, then I think you're going to be able to have your personal health sustain a church that's growing and healthy. Let's dive back into the conversation. Like I said, we talked about fitness, family, flock, finance. We'll use those for right now. Let's talk about fitness. So what kind of vision should a pastor have for their own fitness? So, a couple things I think is important. I'll read a couple of scriptures here. Proverbs 3, 7, and 8 talks about not being wise in your own eyes. We know that. Turn away from evil. But here's what it says. It will be healing to your flesh and refreshment to your bones. And we see that a lot in the book of Proverbs. Actually, Proverbs 4 says a very similar thing. My son, be attentive to my words, incline your ear to my sayings, let them not escape you. But here's what he says. They are life to those who find them, healing to all the flesh. There is something about, that fitness that is about our heart being attuned to what God is saying, and in special revelation, and what he has already spoken in general revelation, that we are both, Adam is formed and breathed into, that he is dust and he is breath. And understanding that we are both breath and dust means that we have got to take just as seriously. And I know what Paul said, hey, the body, that's important. Spiritual is more important. I'm not saying it's not more important.
Right.
Your spirit, I get that. But dude, high level of importance on the dust part of who we are and on the spiritual part of who we are. So the things that come to my mind are, we almost need to have a flywheel for each one of these, So like, how do they build on each other? The flywheel that I use it's the three-legged stool, man. Diet, exercise, rest. And I think that's true both of your spirit and it's true of your physical health. Spiritual health, man, diet. Are we getting the word in? Is it happening every day? Are we only studying the Bible so that we can preach? I hope not. Are we getting, if you read 3 chapters of the Bible a day, you go through the whole Bible in a year. I hope that guys are doing something like that. And again, there's no legalism here. There's a million ways to do it. I know guys that might study one book of the Bible for 3 months in their quiet time. Like, that's great. I'm just saying, is the word getting in? Are there verses being memorized? Are we exercising those, are we exercising? Are we memorizing? Are we, in group, confessing sin? These are kind of part of the exercise practice. And then finally, you think about rest, and you mentioned that. Are we Sabbathing well? Or at least do we have margin? That's the way I think about it more, man. Is there margin in our life? And then physically, I think about it the same way. Man, what are we eating? It's like, man, we are what we eat. Used to, our country spent very little amount of money on medical care, and we spent a lot of money on food, tons of money on food because it was expensive because food is medicine. Right. Now it's the opposite. We've spent very little amount of money on food and we spend a freak ton of money on medicine, right? So food is medicine. What are we eating? Our exercise routines, do we have goals around those things in our life? And finally, are we resting, man? When we're off work, are we off? Are we getting an adequate amount of just literal sleep? Are we sleeping enough? Those kind of things. So that's what comes to my mind. And what I would say is, do you have a vision for that fitness part of your life? The way I know you have a vision is you've got a mental picture of what 10 years from now is going to look like. I mean, this is all the way back to Schwartz, The Magic of Thinking Big. Okay. Mm-hmm. It's just, when you snapshot your mind in 10 years, okay, I'll be 51. Mm-hmm. What does that look like? And I have word. I'm like, dude, I want to be strong. I want to have, I want to look relaxed. I want to be physically imposing, strong, ripped, whatever you want to say. Like, I want to have this stuff in my mind of that's what it looks like, man. Spiritually, I look like I'm growing in the fruit of the Spirit. I'm softer. I'm gentler with my kids and thinking about grandkids and all that kind of stuff. But I have a picture in my mind of what fitness looks like.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I think people are going to be wired different ways. We talk about this a lot. Some people are like super wired by vision. Some people are super wired around the strategy, and some people are really kind of wired around the execution, we need all three of those. For me, a lot of times, if I can just kind of catch that vision, like what you're talking about, then I don't have to create a ton of strategy and execution around it just because I'll kind of naturally do it. Some people are the exact opposite. They really need to focus on that execution just because maybe they're not as naturally disciplined or anything. And I actually don't consider myself super disciplined. I just, the way that I'm wired, if I can catch the vision, then I'm just going to do the stuff. Mm-hmm. For me, one of the things that's been helpful around this is, and I'll do it differently in different seasons of life and different years and everything, but try to identify, because a lot of times people can really over complexify this stuff, because when we get done with this whole flywheel, you're talking about investing in 20 different things, really, So people can make it overly complex. Sometimes I like to think about what are those big rocks? Mm-hmm. Try to simplify a day in this first category. So man, I want, like you said, I want to, whatever it is, I want to read 3 chapters of the Bible. It's okay, that's rock number 1. That's going to take you 20 minutes. I want to. I know you'll pray for specific things on specific days, right? Okay, I want to, so it's okay, we're dealing with some spiritual stuff there. And then it's okay, I want to maybe walk 30 minutes a day. It's okay, that's a big rock, or I want to lift weights for 30 minutes a day. Maybe the goal is I want to get 180 grams of protein a day. Mm-hmm. A lot of times for these different parts of the flywheel, it's only going to be 4 or 5 kind of rocks like that. Mm-hmm. And if you could simplify it down to, honestly, all that stuff probably takes about 70 minutes, 80 minutes for that first category. It can kind of make it not as, because I know there's just people that struggle with their physical health and stuff and working out. Maybe they didn't grow up playing sports or whatever. And so it feels more, you and I were talking about that related to somebody recently. It just feels more imposing to them for whatever reason. Trying to simplify it like that and just say hey, it's really not that complicated. Yeah. You read your Bible, you eat decently, drink some water, eat protein, and walk every day. Right. You're going to be in a better place than a lot of people. Right. So I think that's an important part to try to kind of simplify this down. You kind of maybe get into this with, kind of the vision frame stuff and having a strategy. Yeah, and
I don't know if we could do another one on that, but just I think what you're saying is exactly right. Trying to break it down. And again, it's about fruit, not watering schedule, is what Larry Osborne always says. And I think that's so true. But you got to make sure the fruit in these areas is right in your life and it's healthy, and what you're producing is healthy. And if it's not, you got to go back to the watering system and try to catch a new vision maybe for what it can be. One of the things I think, and I'm actually going to share mine here, I think is good. It's still the sort of, you think about the beginning of a year or whatever. I think it's good to have a yearly goal or a couple of goals that you're going after in a year, generally speaking. You're not a slave to them, but I just think about for fitness, man, what is the goal that we have for ourselves, So,
goals sometimes allow you to measure if the stuff's working or not, So you get into some of this stuff that's a little further away from the Bible, what your cholesterol level should be or what your weight should be or whatever. you don't have a ton of like, you just have best practices stuff that exists in the world, but
Right.
having some goals around that stuff can allow you to measure,
Right.
and is the stuff I'm doing actually working or not?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I feel pretty rock solid with rhythms right now with spiritual stuff. I've just been in a really good rhythm for like years with just the same. I'm very like, man, I'm fine with just doing the same thing every day. So this year for goals wise, I'm like, man, I got a certain amount of weight that I want to lift in 3 different, in bench, squat, and deadlift. So I'm like, I've got that. That's my big goal. That's what I think
what's
about.
the weight?
I want to do 1,100 pounds.
Well, what's the weight for each one?
I gotta break it. I gotta break it down to 1,100 pounds. I mean, I don't know.
All right.
It's gonna be a decent amount for me. I mean, for some guys, it wouldn't be that much, maybe. But so anyway, I just think having a goal like that really helps. All right, think about family for a minute. Again, I'm gonna keep pounding with that provocative question, thought-provoking question is the vision that you have for your marriage and kids as big and grand and detailed and vivid as the vision that you have for your church, right? Same thing with your health. So I think about family here. A couple of verses come to my mind. A wise son makes a glad father, Proverbs 15. I love this passage from Proverbs 19. Health and wealth are inherited from fathers, but a prudent wife is from the Lord. Just realizing the treasure we have. I mean, I think about Proverbs 31, just the absolute treasure that we have. Train up a child in the way he should go. We talked about that, Proverbs 22, 6. So, what kind of vision do we have for our kids? Who are we trying to raise? Again, just closing your eyes and thinking about, man, 10 years from now, what kind of marriage do I want to be in? What does it look like to just have fun interactions daily with that person? What kind of trips do we take? What's our intimacy look like even at that age, or what, whatever age you're at, it's like, hey, what does that look like? I mean, just kind of trying to think through the marriage picture of it. Then the children picture of it. Man, what are we trying to raise? I think having a vision, I was going to read this, just having a vision for what we're trying to raise in our kids. And I just tried to really think about close my eyes and thinking about what I want for my kids. And I thought, man, when they get older, what I'm training them for is, to have a firm handshake and good eye contact, to have a high EQ, to be well-read, politically competent, financially smart, to be tough, physically and mentally healthy, biblically knowledgeable, passionate for the nations, heartbroken over abortion and fatherlessness. They don't make excuses. They're joyful and humorous. They can put their head down and work hard. They're comfortable around outside type work. Their family bonds are the tightest on earth. They dream big without putting limitations around what God can do. They understand that death and life are in the power of the tongue. They don't call names. I've got other stuff here. But the idea is, do we have a vision for what we want to see come out of them? And then are we aligning our life, through day in, day out? You lay it's brick by brick. It's stacking days. It's planting seeds today that will be harvested later. The way I try to think about it is, Flywheel for us, for family, is, man, we have a devotion in the home. I hope that leads them to really love the church and have like a foundation for worship and listening to preaching and interacting with church. And then my prayer is that through the church, they're going to find their greatest friends, and those friends are going to lead them to a spiritual fervency that wants them to have a personal devotion in the home daily. So that's the way I'm thinking about it. Family, any thoughts you have on family?
Yeah, I would say maybe one thing that would be helpful to think about, this is just like my observation with just the way different people are wired and different personalities kind of around me. Like, you can just look into somebody's life, and some people do have trouble with self-evaluation, and self-awareness, but like, you can just look into people's life, and sometimes it's like, man, they're just like an awesome dad, but maybe they're not like as dialed in as like a husband, or like, man, maybe stuff with the marriage is going awesome, but maybe stuff with like the kids and the family unit ain't going super great, And so when we think about this stuff, I do think we have to kind of take that stuff into account, because you probably gonna have to work a little bit more on those areas that aren't doing as well. Like, I would say for myself, just like Allison and I, we've never struggled that much with our personal kind of relationship with one another. I don't know if it's just because we went to middle school and high school together. I don't know if we worked out all that stuff early on, but like, yeah, we don't have to put a ton of strategy into it. Like, it's not like we need to do these 4 things every week. Like, that just naturally kind of works a little bit better than stuff with our kids, like we've just kind of realized that, like, we got to put more thought and more work and more strategy into stuff with our kids. And even like I mentioned earlier, like me helping Allison to lead our kids. Because a lot of times, I don't know if it's because my role at the church or whatever, but like, you know, I think for a lot of time, I just kind of thought, man, if I can just have the vision, then like Allison could just be the number 2 and she can just rock and roll and run with it. And it's like, no, I mean, she needed more from me in helping with that. You know, because like I think at church, you know, like that's what I would think about. Like, man, I just need to, you know, get somebody that can just run with whatever this vision that you have or that we have, and they just kind of rock and roll. And it's like, well, that doesn't apply exactly in the same way to, you know, the way that we're going to lead our kids. So yeah, just trying to figure out, you know, and people. The other thing I would say is I think people are really affected by how they're raised. You know, some people had a really good model of this growing up, and so they're crushing it. You know, and other people, it's really all the areas of life, because you see this with like financial issues too. Like if you had some pretty financially competent parents, a lot of times you just starting way ahead versus somebody that like, man, the finances were always a train wreck. Then it's like, man, you know, so just kind of, you know, you don't got to go like crazy into all the history and everything, but like, just kind of know what you're walking into these different areas with. Right.
Man, I'll do Flock pretty quick, and that way we can spend the last bit of our time talking about finance, because Flock is our entire it's our entire podcast, right? But I do think it's interesting how much in the book of Proverbs, when you start talking about your work, that it is tied to your skill level and your ethic. Man, we live in a day when every social and cultural ill and everything that's wrong in someone's life, we try to pin on a system. When the Bible is so clear, many times a slack hand causes poverty, but the hand of the diligent makes rich. In all toil there is profit, but merely talk leads only to poverty. Do you see a man skillful in his work? He will stand before kings. You know, there's just I'm not saying oppression is not real, obviously, especially almost primarily in the Bible, it's talking about economic oppression. But, you know, generally speaking, though, there is a real clear tie between how good we get at something, how diligent we are with it, and the fruit that comes from it. And I think that's true with pastoring as well. Like, man, we want to get really good at the flock. You know, we want to get really good at what we do, and we're hoping that that's going to in turn create growth in the church. I'm not talking about financial growth. I'm just talking about like growth in the church, and we're going to see the work of our hands kind of flourish and blossom, right? I think a good verse for breaking barriers, I talked about this, is this is Psalm 78:72. I sent you this the other day. With upright heart, he shepherded them and guided them with skillful hand. And I think a lot of times we want to talk a ton about upright heart, which we should, but we might need to also talk about skillful hand. And what does it mean for a shepherd in a church to have a skillful hand and be good at what they do? And so, man, the flock concept is just trying really hard to be the best that we can be, to learn, and then to have good strategy around that stuff. We talked about gather groups, give, go. And then we try to put a goal around it. I think I mentioned the goal for fitness. My goal for family is our 20th anniversary this year. So me and Anna, so I want to crush that. That's our goal. It's a 1-year thing that I'm thinking about. But for the flock this year, we want to grow our age-based ministries by 20%. And so it's a good target. We have a good goal. But let's move on. We only have a few minutes left here. Let's talk about finance. All right. So, I think that we've mentioned this. We've been in enough situations where it kind of feels like many times pastors, because they have said, hey, I'm not, in ministry to make a ton of money. I could have gone business route or whatever, and I'm not doing that. Then we decide to it's almost like we can just kind of neglect this because there's not going to be a lot of surplus, which to me is the exact opposite of what we should do. It's like, man, that feels fully victims culture. You know, it seems like what we should do more stewardship culture is like, well, if I'm walking into a profession that maybe is going to put me behind because it's in a nonprofit world, then I need to be sharper than the average bear when it comes to my financial picture and how I can create margin and what I can do with that margin. Proverbs 27:23 says, know well the condition of your flock. Man, give attention to what you have, you know. I think about Proverbs 21. We mentioned this earlier. Precious treasures and oil are in the wise man's dwelling. A fool devours all they have. You know, are we going to have just this good picture of margin? Riches and honor are with me. You know, I think wisdom is accompanied many times by wisdom, or wisdom and honor are accompanied by riches and wealth. And that's what it says, enduring wealth and righteousness. Proverbs 8:18. So, you know, we want to make sure that we're teaching our staff financial competence But we also want to make sure we're sharp on it ourselves. Again, I'll give you the thought-provoking question. Is the vision that you have, Pastor, for your financial future, is it as vivid, as vibrant? Is it as sharp? Can you articulate it as every bit as well as you can for your church? Mm-hmm. Because if not, then I think you just have an area of what is part of your flywheel, whether you want it to be or not. It is part of the flywheel. It is part of your life. It is a huge part of your life. And, we're just, if we're neglecting that, then again, we're not going to outpace the level of personal growth. If our church explodes and yet we're, going further and further into debt, we don't understand what our kids are going to need to go to college, whether we're not on track for retirement. Like, if those things are true of us, even if the church is exploding, eventually something's going to break and it's going to end up catching up with us.
Yeah, totally. So, there's so many different directions I think we can go here with, just how to think about money and how to think about what you want to do with your money. Theologically, like you just think of the Bible, like those 3 or 4 categories of like, hey, there's clearly a concept in the Bible of save, right? Where like everything that you have, you don't use up, right? So there's the concept of save. You obviously have to live off of some money. Mm-hmm. There's a concept of investing for the future, for your kids and for your kids' kids. And then obviously there's a really big concept in the Bible of giving and generosity. So I would just say something around there should be the starting place for, a pastor's finances. And I'll just kind of share some stuff that I do that's helpful for me. I would say I'm a lot better at making money than saving money. Just based on kind of wirings. So I could just kind of know that. I try to kind of lean into that and also kind of protect myself from that weakness of not being as good at saving money. So for me, I just like to have a vision for, okay, if I make $1, like if I earn $1, like what happens to that, like what am I doing for like pre-tax money, like what am I doing in terms of giving? How much do we need to live off of? If we have extra after that, how do we want to invest it? Do we want to invest it financially, meaning like, keep it like in terms of money, so like it's going to grow for the future, or do we want to spend that money and invest it back in another area of the flywheel? Mm-hmm. The other way that I like to think about money is think of it in like time horizons. Like, cause a lot of people don't, for some reason, they just don't think like this, and it kind of catches up with them when they get older in life, where they have to leave their job unexpectedly. So I like to think in like, it's very similar to a lot of vision stuff that we share. I like to think in like a 2 to 3 year time horizon, like a 10-year time horizon, and then like a retirement time horizon.
Right.
So, that couple year time horizon, I don't know why, but something in COVID, kind of like when COVID happened and churches shut down and all that, I kind of just got this in my mind. Like, if something happens to you to where you can't do vocational ministry, like you're earning money from ministry, you can't do vocational ministry in the same way, and it's outside your control, like it's not something you're choosing, do you have anything kind of baked in for like, man, how long can you live without a paycheck this week, I guess, Like, I don't know that you need to, at any point in time, have like multiple years of savings or whatever, but like, you probably need something, because life happens, right? Something can happen with your kids. Something can happen with one of your parents. Something can happen with your spouse. Just having some idea of like, what would I do if tomorrow I didn't have like a paycheck from the church anymore? And a lot of people just haven't even crossed that bridge, So that's kind of the near time horizon. 10-year time horizon is just kind of that expanded. The retirement time horizon, it's very sad because some pastors, like in smaller churches, for whatever reason, them no retirement, and get to 65 or 70. For retirement to work, you're basically going to have 25 times what you spend per year. So whatever that number is, if that's 50 grand, man, 50 grand times 25, like it's over $1 million that someone's going to have. So just having that in mind, like you're saying, the vision,
right?
Only once you have that stuff in mind can you begin to reverse engineer how would I possibly ever get there? Yeah. And I think pastors use the fact that maybe pastors don't make a lot of money, or maybe we didn't start ministry because of money. They kind of use that as an excuse,
right,
to kind of poorly think about their finances.
That's right.
And I would just say one last thing and then kind of hand it back over to you. Like, man, I think anything that you can invest in increasing your financial IQ is only going to benefit the church exponentially. It's going to make you better at talking about what the Bible talks about in terms of money. You're not going to have fear around this concept.
Right.
You're going to realize what an important biblical pattern it is. And you're going to handle the church's resources better. And you're going to coach your staff and them handling the resources better. So, this is not just like a worldly topic. I mean, money, treasure is probably one of the top 5 kind of like categories in the Bible.
Yeah, I love what you're saying, because I think that pastors can fall into, it's the Oz principle. Okay, it's like I can live above the line accountability or below the line accountability, and if I'm going to just say, hey, I'm not accountable for this, I'm sort of in victim culture, or I can live accountable. And I think pastors sometimes are just like, they just choose to live in victim culture. I mean, how many times have we heard guys say, well, our deacon board or our elder team, they're not going to go for that, whether it be talking about a sabbatical or talking about trying to actually do a salary study and a fair wage and all this kind of stuff. And my reaction to that is, yeah, but are you even trying to engage them on it? Like, I mean, we just kind of assume like, man, well, they're never going to do that, or they don't understand the way the church works. And it's like, well, there's only one person that can try to teach them this stuff. Right. Well, I don't know. That feels kind of weird. I'm talking about my own salary, and it's like, well, it's like, well, okay, just don't do it and be a victim, Right. Or you could try to help them, teach them, figure out how, because man, like you're saying, this stuff is just sort of if you are going further into debt, if your wife is seeing that you have created a job and a career that will not put your kids in college at all, if she's starting to smell a rat and understanding we are going to have zero retirement, like you can't tell me those things are not going to become a pretty big glaring issue. And you could try to hyper spiritualize it, man. We've given it all for the mission or whatever. But like, hey, dude, not never having read a financial book ain't exactly the same thing as being Jim Elliott. Okay. Right. There's 2 different categories here. Right. Like some people, you're right, man. They literally laid it all down. Some of us are just like, man, there's about 6 books I could have you read in about 3 months and you'd be way better. You think about this stuff a lot better, but we hide. We don't understand it. We're raised in a blue collar background. We don't understand stock market. We don't understand. So we just hide behind that stuff. And I would just say that's going to be a real detriment, because your church is not going to outrun this, man. There is a real tie, I think, many times between churches that grow and guys who understand money. And it's not the icky thing of like they're getting money from the church or something. It's just that they sort of understand how it works. They've invested a lot of time in trying to figure out how it works. And there's an inverse relationship, I think, to those things sometimes. Do you have a vision for your money and for your financial life that blesses your family? Do you have that vision? And is it as vivid as, I mean, you just say it like this. Do you have a net worth goal for 10 years? Mm-hmm. If somebody's like, man, I've never even considered that, they got work to do here, I think.
Or what is net worth?
Yeah, well, yeah. If you ask that too. Okay, what are some things that we've read in this? Richest Man in Babylon, Wealthy Gardener, a lot of Dave Ramsey type stuff.
Psychology of Money.
Psychology of Money is a good one. So I mean, there's a million books like this out there that can just kind of help you. Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Yeah. That's sort of a classic one. All right, man. Last thing we'll say is, and I want to give you the last word on this, because you mentioned you wanted to say it on here or just talk about it for a minute. These things are categorically kind of fixed. We've talked about different ways, but the stuff's all the same. But they do change over the stage of your life, And so my question is like, man, how do you see these things changing, or how should we be engaging them? About the time we get settled in one, everything is going to change anyway, because now you're in a different stage.
Right.
How do you think about that?
I got kind of 2 thoughts. So yes, they change, and we can kind of get to that, but also, like there's kind of like, this is a different analogy than Flywheel, but it kind of works. Like we never have balance in our life. We are balancing always, right? If your kid needs more from you tomorrow, then you got to put more energy there, right? You're never gonna have perfect balance between each of these things.
Balance is a myth. Yep.
Sometimes they require a lot more, and so like you just have to acknowledge, and this is probably the reason for like, man, make sure you have a good category for margin and that sort of thing. Like, man, I remember 3 years ago, my brother died. It was like, I really had a hard time after that because the energy that I put into each of these, it had to kind of change, you know? And it was like, I was dealing with physical ailments I'd never dealt with before. I had to put more energy into my parents like I never had before. You know, it was affecting my wife. Like it was just like, man. And I think that's reason to say why each of these are parts of the flywheel. Like, we're not always in control of it, but like, man, if one of these is having a big issue, whether it's your fault or not,
right,
it is going to be the thing that will dominate your life. So like, man, if there's a sick kid or the marriage is on the rocks, or like, man, you could be crushing it and then all of a sudden you're in the hospital and your physical health is struggling, I promise you're going to be almost thinking about nothing else but your personal physical health.
Right.
So it's one of the reasons it's just so important that these, like you said, these are all and is. Like, you cannot get away from these things.
Right.
The other thing is, like, man, we have life stages, you know, and like you can't be so, your grasp can't be so tight that these things can't kind of change. The categories are not going to change, right? But like, man, you know, you become more financially secure and more of your money begins to work for you. You maybe have to put less and less energy into that, and you can put more energy into something else. You know, like there's a unique challenge when your kids are young, right? But there's even a more unique challenge when they begin to grow up and all have their own personal issues that you're trying to help love them and pastor them through, you know? And so it's just like, man, there's just stages. And I think to continue to grow as people created in God's image, same thing with your church growing, man, you're going to have to be really humble and really wise when you get up against these next stages, right?
Yeah.
Like you and I have just both moved into our 40s. That is a unique stage for a man. And if you just kind of enter into that stage being like, man, I'm going to do things exactly the way I did when I'm 30.
Right.
I was recounting to someone the other day the types of things I would do in my early 30s. And it's just like, I can't do that anymore.
Right.
If I want to keep doing that, I'm just going to absolutely just crush myself.
It's going to break. Something's going to break.
So these stages are just like real, you know, like, man, your kid's only going to be in your home so long,
right?
You know, and most of the time you're going to make more money across your life, you know, like as you get older. I don't know. Anything else you'd add?
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's totally right. The stages are going to be different. I think these categories are kind of fixed. And we see examples of this in our church all the time of guys who are just crushing it, man. They're just crushing that move from kids to grandkids or whatever. And we just got to be flexible enough. I forgot to do this. I want to mention it just because I said I would. I mentioned the goal and flywheel for each one of these. I didn't mention it for finance. So for me, my goal this year financially is we do some real estate stuff, investing in multifamily. And so I'm trying to fill a certain amount of doors this year, which I am already thinking I may not hit the goal, but we're going to try. Tough environment out there, dude. And then the way I think about the flywheel for that is ministry, you know, living in a way that my ministry is going to create margin, investing that margin in ways that help us live more and give more. And as we live more and give more, I really think it's going to make me better at ministry. And it's going to help us have more margin. So, all right, hey guys, that's it. Man, we really appreciate you tuning in on this one and hope that it's been really helpful for you. We always have a one-day event coming up that's just right around the corner. And so we'd love for you to check out breakinggrowthbarriers.com. And you'll see our next one day coming up this quarter. And we also have a Facebook page, guys. That Facebook page is lively, and it's a great way to connect with some other guys that are looking to grow and go. Thanks.